Hello and welcome to Legislative Report with your State Representative Bill Adolph from the 165th Legislative District in Delaware County. I'm your host, Scott Little. In addition to being your state representative in the Pennsylvania House, Representative Adolph serves as the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, which has the responsibility each year of helping to create the state budget. That's what we're going to talk about today, and want to welcome Representative Bill Adolph. Representative, first of all, let's talk about how difficult it is to craft a state budget in the current economic climate.
Very difficult, Scott.
This is a half-hour program, by the way. So.
Yeah, it's hard to get everything in a half an hour, but it's a difficult process because obviously the economy, national economy, state governments usually come out of the recession maybe a year or two after the private sector. Pennsylvania has such great natural resources, but it's also very diverse. There's a big difference between Northwest Pennsylvania and Southeast Pennsylvania. So what we try to do as far as the Appropriations Committee is to try to get members from all over the Commonwealth to be members of that committee. And this way we have input from those areas. Because what may be going well and sounds good in one area doesn't always sound good and goes well in the other areas. So we try to get as much input as we can from all areas of the state, and I think that helps in our final decision.
Now, we're obviously talking about state government here. I say that because the federal government has a huge impact on what you're able to do they not?
Oh, absolutely, Scott. And you know, you hear about unfunded mandates all the time. Well, the state faces that all the time from the federal government. Medicaid expansion and our Medicaid and Medicare expenses are constantly going up, over $1 billion a year. And then to make matters worse, this year, we received $340 million less in FMAP payments, which you know, I didn't quite understand, but Pennsylvania received the least amount of money than compared to any other states, or the largest decrease is probably the best way to say it. Largest decrease in FMAP funds from one year to the next, $340 million. The services are still there. So we got to replace that $340 million decrease with state money. So you talk about federal tax rates. Okay, federal tax rates on capital gains affected our state income tax tremendously this year. It affected our revenues, and obviously in our projections, based upon 2012 as compared to 2013, a big difference, mainly because of what they did in Washington, D.C. in increasing the federal tax rates, both for capital gains and other income. So this particular year has been a real struggle. Obviously, the governor came out in February, proposed a $29.4 billion increase. But he was basing that on projections that unfortunately, Scott, never came in. April, the month of April alone was, you know, almost $500 million less than what was projected. March was 100 million. May and June were a little bit better, but it really, and a lot of it had to do with some of the federal laws.
You brought up a very good point that we probably can't mention enough, and that is the difference between what actually comes out at the end and what the governor proposes back in February. So much is made about that announcement, but it really is just a stake in the ground to work off of, is it not?
I always called it a blueprint. You know, it's a blueprint to work on. And if everything, you know, obviously the months of March, April, and May are some of our largest revenue months of the year. Because of the various federal tax rates changing, tax rates going up, people in Pennsylvania were less aggressive with selling stocks and bonds. As a result, less capital gains results in less state income tax.
You've talked about the current economic climate here, and there's a couple numbers that we really need to bring out. The latest statistics, Pennsylvania was second in job creation in May. Our unemployment rate is now at a 5-year low. Is it fair to say that the fiscal practices of the last 3 years have really this has been the fruit of those practices, I guess I'd ask you?
Well, I think as a result of some of the legislation that we passed and actually led the way with the tort reform and workers' compensation, unemployment compensation, obviously it takes time, but I think in a period of 3.5 years, I think you're seeing the benefits of passing legislation like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, that, in other words, the difficult choices that were made are now starting to come to fruit.
No question about it. I mean, down in our area, the threat and the reality of 3 oil refineries closing would have jeopardized probably close to 3,000 direct jobs and probably another 15,000 indirect jobs. The cost to those local communities in loss of revenue, as well as the unemployment benefits that the state of Pennsylvania would have had to pay out to those unemployed refinery workers. And I'm not just talking about, those blue-collar guys. We're talking about engineers, we're talking about administrators, et cetera, et cetera. This is the entire, the job markets involved in that. So it was important, and this administration and this legislature worked very closely with Secretary Walker, who did a fantastic job of enticing these new companies into the area.
I was going to say, and also statewide, you're starting to see larger companies come in, and are we becoming more slowly business friendly?
Well, my background is that of a public accountant, and one of the most erroneous taxes that we've had in Pennsylvania for a long time is the capital stock and franchise tax. And this is a tax based upon net worth. It had nothing to do with your profits. And you could owe an awful lot of money to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and actually lose money in that year. And I heard over and over again that one tax was one of the reasons why Pennsylvania was not selected for a relocation of their business. So we have been slowly but surely repealing that the capital stock and franchise tax. I really believe this is starting to affect companies coming in.
This is not your first budget. Does this job get any easier?
No. No, it doesn't, Scott. I mean, it's a tough job. I mean, obviously, your first concern is being good stewards for the taxpayers' money. That's number one. And number two, we have to have a balanced budget here in Pennsylvania. In Washington, well, they don't do budgets anymore. Here we have to have a balanced budget, due on time, and that was one of the things that I've been trying to emphasize. Let's get this budget done. My mentor and fellow representative from Delaware County, Matt Ryan, former Speaker of the House, always emphasized to members that the most important thing that you do here as a legislator is get a budget done on time. And you have to keep on moving to that end. Because if you don't get a budget done on time, and a lot of people don't realize this, Scott, money doesn't leave Harrisburg. And when I mean that, school districts do not get paid. Hospitals do not receive their money. Higher education institutions do not receive their money. Rape crisis centers do not receive their money. Cancer research institutions do not receive their money. So all these things that people take for granted, and they should take for granted, it should happen, but under the previous administration, never took place. And that's something that, as chairman of the Appropriations Committee, I tried to keep us on schedule. And this year was more difficult because of the declining revenues. And we talked earlier about the various reasons why we had a decline in revenue. But despite that, and we waited, and actually June picked up a little bit, and that helped us with our revenue projections. And you know, our final budget, Scott, you know, was $29 billion. So, you know, I think it's a responsible budget. It's sustainable from the standpoint that we went through some good exercises. We scrutinized all various state agencies' fund balances and see if they had extra money in their balances, money that wasn't being spent, and we transferred those over into the general fund. So a lot of people call them gimmicks. I call it a good exercise. I mean, you know, my neighbors back home and the business folks back home and across the Commonwealth, you know, it's still taxpayers' dollars. They got up here and we appropriated it into those agencies. And if they don't need that money, why should I have those balances? And the governor certainly agrees with that.
Before we talk about some specifics, you mentioned about being good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
Albeit on a much larger scale. Are you not using some of the same practices that households would use insofar as realizing what you have and using the existing money that you do have?
No question about it. I mean, households are using it, small business people do it, large businesses do it. I mean, you have to do that in order to balance a budget and make sure that the taxpayers' money is being spent responsibly.
And a key part of that, and this budget again, is no new taxes.
No new taxes. You know, we'll go through the revenue pie chart in just a minute, but you know, most of our revenue is derived from two taxes. Personal income tax that folks get taken out of their pay on a weekly basis or a semi-monthly basis or a monthly basis, 3.01% of their hard-earned wages. Or if you're in business, you know, they pay 3.01% on a quarterly basis, and that represents you know, over 30% of our income, of our revenue. And then sales tax. And Pennsylvania's got a crazy sales tax system. Something I like to see.
That's a half-hour program right there.
You know, some things, you know, pizza's cold are not taxed, pizza's hot are taxed, you know, just to, you know, name, I happen to like pizza, and that's why I talk about pizza, but you know, clothing and food, your weekly groceries are tax-free, but you know, luxury items, you know, they like to tax at 6%, and that represents over 30% as well. So that's our two main sources of income.
Let's take a short break. We'll be back to talk more about the state budget and the role of the Appropriations Committee right after this brief message.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Did you know that the chamber of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives contains a painting depicting the 24 hours of the day? Located in the center of the ceiling, the mural, titled The Hours, was created by artist Edwin Austin Abbey. This wonderful masterpiece charts the setting of the sun, moon, and the many stars that grace the heavens. 24 maidens, who each represent an hour of the day, begin each day in light and gladness and ends in solemn drapery carried on still shoulders. Now you know.
Welcome back to the Legislative Report with State Representative Bill Adolph. We're talking about the state budget for fiscal year 2014-2015. Representative, let's go right to the highlights of the budget.
Well, like I said, it was a $29 billion budget, which is about 1.5% more than the year before. Okay, and if you take a look at the pie chart, 35%, or $10.34 billion, is spent on pre-K to 12 education. You add that to a 1.67 in higher ed, which is another 6%. Talking about 41% of our state budget is for education. The public welfare, the Department of Public Welfare, which a lot of people say, oh, Department of Public Welfare. Well, only 2% of this $11.2 billion is what I would consider welfare, medical assistance and cash grants and stuff of that nature. Most of it's got is hospital funding, nursing home funding, okay, for our senior citizens, our most needed individuals with disabilities, both physical and intellectual disabilities, and it's not what a lot of people think it is. And we were able to increase funding for those with intellectual disabilities. The budget includes an additional $13.28 million to provide for home and community-based services. And will serve an additional 1,250 people on the waiting list, which is great news. But when you get right into education, special education will receive an additional $20 million, in this year's budget, and that certainly has been something that's been a priority for a lot of legislators and especially school districts. Pre-K counts, it's an 11.5% increase of $10 million on pre-K, and a lot of the professionals in that industry talk about, the earlier you get these kids into school, into that atmosphere, it will help in the long run and save the state, millions of dollars later on in life.
Some people would say that's the best investment we actually make, correct?
Without question. So, we have an increase overall of about $520 million in education. It's a lot of pension cost goes into that. That's an issue that we could spend another 2 days on. Okay, but some type of pension reform is going to have to take place here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, we have not been able to convince my good friends on the other side of the aisle that that's necessary, and therefore we've kind of been stymied on that. But it's going to have to happen. You talk to your school board directors, you talk to your superintendents, your business managers, and I really believe even the state employees and the public school employees, they understand that. We're going to have to take care of that because just to give you a little example, it only goes back to 2010. 2010, our public school employee state contribution was $300 million. A lot of money. 14-15, $1.4 billion. it's all education. It's classroom expenses. It's superintendent expenses. It's administrators. But that is what is required. And it's going to go up again next year. And it's going to go up again the following year. So unless we're able to solve this problem, you know, we have very little money for anything else. So the plan that we develop, Scott, I think has to look into that. So it's a big thing. It's a big thing.
You talked about education spending, and you've heard it. We've all heard it. Supposedly, it was cut a few years ago. To that, you say what?
Baloney.
And we can demonstrate that also, but explain what you mean by baloney.
Yeah, baloney. That's baloney. And you know, the truth of the matter is, you talk about federal mandates, unfunded mandates. Well, for about 2.5 years, we received federal stimulus money. It was to spur the economy, and Pennsylvania was receiving about $3 billion a year. And basically, it was spent in 3 areas: education, transportation, and the Department of Welfare, okay? And it was supposed to be for shovel-ready projects, if you remember that infamous term, okay. Unfortunately, what the previous administration did is they decreased state spending in those areas and backfilled it with federal stimulus money, okay? So when this administration, in my first budget as the majority appropriations chair, in education we had lost $1 billion in federal stimulus money. Within 2 years, we are able to spend more in state dollars than any other time before. And now we're at a record-breaking $10.5 billion. So what we lost $1 billion, but it was federal stimulus money, not state tax dollars. And I think most people understand that. But if you say it if you say it over and over and over again, people start saying, well, I guess they did cut. If we didn't have it, we couldn't cut it. We didn't receive it from the federal government, okay? Everybody knew that federal stimulus money was going to come to an end, and that's what happened.
Let's talk about your individual districts as well.
Oh, well, first of all, I'm very proud of the public education that is in my legislative district. I represent 3 school districts, Scott: Springfield School District, Marple Newtown School District, and Radnor School District. And this year, I can tell you that Springfield School District, and they're all different sizes. They're not, they don't all have the same number of kids. So some school districts receive more, but Springfield School District is going to receive about a 9.5% increase over the year before, and that includes, the pension contribution and the basic ed, and also the new Ready to Learn block grants and transportation funding. But $8.7 million Springfield School District will receive in total. Marple Newtown, $10 million, an 8.6% increase. And finally, Radnor will receive a total of $8.6 million, or 11.5% increase. Now, these percentage increases are high, and but it's because the pension contributions are increasing very rapidly, okay? But these school districts receive roughly about 12% of their total funding from the state of Pennsylvania, and most of the school district funding in my hometowns are paid at the local level. But we're doing the best that we can up here to provide funding, additional funding that they have.
Finally, let's talk about some other highlights of the budget, in particular the appropriation for the state police and some new classes of them, which we move closer slowly to almost a full complement, do we not?
Well, Scott, it's very important because public safety is a huge issue statewide, and whether you have the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the Schuylkill Expressway, or the Blue Route going through your district, which I happen to have, I-95, and they're all connected. And a million people drive through my legislative district every day. You need state troopers. And this year, we're going to have enough to train 4 cadet classes, an additional 350 state troopers. And they complement our fine local police departments. So we'll get the state police back and running at 100%.
Anything else you'd like to point out as highlights?
Well, I think that the governor actually started this new program for state grants for college kids, and obviously, once again, we didn't have the revenue that he had projected, which was projected, but we're starting the program, and we put $5 million, and it's going to be a good program, and it's for middle income folks, incomes that families that have income between roughly $87,000 a year and like $115,000 a year, and it's also going to be based upon the GPA, so there, that comes into play. So it's a little different than the normal state grant that FIA administers. So it's a good program. I give the governor a lot of credit for coming up with it. Matter of fact, I think it was Representative Marguerite Quinn's bill, very similar, from Bucks County, and I think over the years, I think you're going to see that program get increased revenue from the general fund.
Well, Chairman, this, as you mentioned, has been a very difficult fiscal year. Next year's, I'm sure, will be possibly equally as difficult, if not more. But we're into that fiscal year right now. You've done a good job.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a job that I really enjoy. I do really enjoy the appropriations. When I got up here, Matt Ryan, who was the Speaker of the House at the time, as a matter of fact, he was not the Speaker of the House, but he was the minority leader, appointed me to the Appropriations Committee as a freshman. So it's something that I do really enjoy. We have difficult times, but people work hard, and their tax money should be spent wisely. And we have a lot of work to do this coming year. The staff that I work with up here is already thinking ahead, and that's what's important.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Again, you've been listening to the Legislative Report with State Representative Bill Adolph, who's also the House Majority Chairman of the Appropriations Committee. That's all the time we have for this month's program. If you have any questions about what you've seen here, or if Representative Adolph can help you with any state government matter, you're encouraged to contact him through his district office or his website. That information will be on the screen in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us next time for Legislative Report with your State Representative Bill Adolph.